Hey, how do you feel about some high rarity cards, or maybe some foreign ones, or maybe be ahead of the game with others by preparing for future set releases with very quick shipping? Check out EJ Gaming and use code British5 on checkout for 5% off on all your orders. Link in the description.
Greetings, duelists, and welcome to another video. So, as you guys already know, our next Forbidden Unlimited list it starts on the 25th, which is this next Monday. So, roughly 5 days from now, we are going to start a new format. And one deck that is on a lot of people's radar at the moment is Tearlament. With the banning of Arise Heart, Tearlaments just became a more favorable and more desirable deck for a lot of people because despite the heavy hits that it received on February 11th, this strategy is still very viable, is still very strong. However, Arise Heart gatekeeping like this deck's existence and the popular Kashtira as a whole, as well as other common counters to it, just made a lot of people not play this deck. And even despite all of that, this deck has seen some amount of success. You had Chupin Shu that topped nationals with Tearlaments. You had like one or two people that topped like remote duels with it. You had a bunch of regional tops. So like if you don't face the actual common counters with the strategy, the deck pretty much just became very viable. If you've been following this channel for a good amount of time, you already know that I am a very big advocate for Tearlaments. I have experimented with the deck a lot. Like, here's just like example of stuff that I've done with the deck. And I've already spoken about the deck in the past as well. However, I'm going to bring up something a little bit different. I'm going to name two issues that Tearlament have at the moment that cannot be easily fixed. But at the same time, I will mention one huge benefit that Tearlaments got out of this next list. So I'll go with the pros first. One of the good news is Bestial Magnamut being limited, as well as Arise Heart being forbidden, gives this deck a lot of legroom. You have two contenders less to deal with, at least more frequently, and that really gives you a very open space with your deck, because now a lot of main deck or side deck hate that you had for those specific outliers are stuff you can start moving away from. Like, now you're not forced into playing books or talents or like other cards that really were not just beneficial for your strategy and kind of conflicted with what you want to do with your engine. Instead, you can now play other cards that really help bolster your strategy. So that being said, now let's talk about two key caveats that Tearlaments have at the moment. The first one is with the limitation of many of the tier names, this deck is very, very luck based. If you high roll your cards right and you hit the right cards, like hitting a Guido or Kelbeck, hitting your tier names at a good pace, you're probably going to win the game. Like, this is a deck that is super hyperbolic when their plays resolve. A lot of things that they can do are very, very oppressive. They can not just end your opponent's turn, but it can just like dedicate themselves into like pressuring your opponent. Another benefit from this deck is that if you hit the millers, like, you're shaving cards out of your opponent's deck, meaning that you immediately find out and you immediately have not player knowledge of your opponent's strategy, and therefore you can just try to craft an end board that just to beat the specific matchup. Let's say, for example, you know that you're facing against Purely and because you milled like 5 cards out of your opponent and you saw it was a purely opponent, then you can just try to make an M board that doesn't lose to the purely cards as often, or just is resilient to the board breakers, and you just have solid answers for the purely strategy if they try to like go happy memory or try to activate the purely street or stuff like that. But if you don't mill the right cards at the right moment, you are just going to be a shy away from like playing the game. Your opponent will have one step ahead of you because you exhausted some of your resources just for consistent milling. And if you don't hit the right cards, like you're just not going to win the game. Like I had one duel where I milled 25 cards out of my deck, and out of those 25 cards, the 3 main tier monsters were still in the main deck. And needless to say, I didn't win that game because I just didn't get to the right cards. Another issue that you'll have with this deck is that deck building is going to be even tougher, because even though there are cards that help your strategy, some cards are good if you mill them, and some cards are good if you don't mill them. One example is if we look at the Revolution build, you want to open a card like Jet Synchron. However, you don't want to open a card like Zephyros or Beast King of the Swamp. And Jet Synchron is another card that you don't want to open with, but if you mill it, you get very good significant advantage out of. And that's pretty much variance. You can't control what you mill, and you can't control what you draw in this deck. One of the reasons Tearlaments was very, very strong was because you had multiple names out of everyone, and it meant that milling them was going to happen more often than not, despite you drawing multiple copies of all of them. I think one saving grace from this strategy is that in the future, like, the player who will be rewarded the most out of playing Tearlament is the one that has to fight a lot of barriers. One, you have to mill consistently. Two, you have to have a game plan with whatever strategy you're playing alongside the tier deck. You need to face the right matchup. You also have to not get hand trapped, because some people might not know, but this deck can fall to single hand traps if you don't like open the right extenders. Like a simple Ash Blossom or Droll Logbird can just end your turn if you didn't mill the right cards. And one last hurdle is like you have to make sure that the ceiling of your deck is good enough for the ceiling of other decks. I think if the current decks of the format that we've been seeing are still going to be like the top contenders, like for example Unchained, then you do have a good advantage if you're playing Tearlaments, because that is not an unfavorable matchup for you. However, there will be a chance where you don't open as optimal to just beat through Unchained's board, and the Unchained player is just going to steamroll advantage over you because they drew the right cards when you didn't. There is one more problem I want to bring up with Tearlaments, and I think it's a lot easier if I show you a replay than just explaining the situation at hand. And I'll pause it as we go along. As you can see here, I'm playing the Lunalight version of Tearlaments. If you've been following this channel, you already know that I played the Lunalight version in the past. It's one of the versions that I've enjoyed with Tearlaments the most. And I think it's one of the more solid ways to build a deck at the moment if you know what you're doing. As you can see here, this is a Tearlament mirror match. And when it comes to the Tearlament mirror match, is going to be very, very decisive on like a lot of key factors. You'll see what I mean by that. As you can see here, my opponent foolished for a Guido. If he knew that this was a mirror match, this probably would not have happened. Like, he wouldn't have dunked a Guido, he probably would have dunked another thing differently. That being said, we both milled 5, and he immediately sees the Pearl Rhino in my graveyard, and he sees the Rainbow Bridge. Just the Pearl Rhino alone is very, very significant, and this goes back to what I said about you having player knowledge when you're milling cards out of your opponent. So now my opponent knows that I'm on a variant of Tearlaments, and that's going to change the way he does his plays, because if he didn't knew that, he probably would have done something a lot different from what he's about to do. So now my opponent resolves a lot of their cards. He's doing like the optimal plays. He's doing Reno. He's dunking. He's adding with Zodiac. He's milling more cards. He milled the Kelbeck, and if you noticed, he didn't activate Kelbeck. Since he knows I'm on Tearlaments now, he doesn't want to give me any sort of advantage. So now the Kelbeck mill is not going to be very useful for him. However, he does keep going, and he does keep playing like optimally, like the way he can. Which is Chisholm in his deck. As of late, I've been seeing a few people playing a centralized Shadow version. I guess we can thank Chu Chu for popularizing that variant. And I think moving forward, this might be like one of the better Tearlament builds. I already did a video talking about Shadows in the past, and not only that, like, I also brought up how like the Shadow cards really just helped the strategy like as a whole. It seems like this replay got bugged, so I guess I'll apologize about that. But once as this is bugged, I guess I will talk about the two other key factors. The thing that is going to happen in this game, or was to happen in this game, was that my opponent was going to end up summoning Dweller, knowing that I'm on Tearlaments. And the Tearlament mirror match is very, very volatile, because Dweller is a very decisive card in the matchup. And not only is Dweller very decisive, but like winning the die roll is also decisive, and like sending key cards is also decisive. So that's just another thing to take onward when it comes to like the Tearlament mirror itself. Sadly, I cannot show the rest of the replay, but I'll give you the end result. I pretty much lost this duel. My opponent ended up summoning Dweller. However, my card, I had a better engine than he had, but the Dweller just was enough to help him secure the game. So the last thing I want to talk about is how is Tearlament looking in the OCG. If you already know, Tearlaments have been topping consistently in the OCG like for the past 6 to 7 months, even after they have really heavy hits. And one of the things that make it very possible is the existence of Chaos Ruler, which is something that we don't have. Also, Glow Bulb is another card that they have on their arsenal that we do not. Fairy Tale Snow is another one. However, exactly 1 month from this recording, on October 20th, we're going to receive the Sinful Spoils engine. And this engine really, really helped the strategy a lot. It's going to help a lot of strategies in general. And moving forward, between this and the Horus engine, you're probably going to see Tearlaments a lot more than you are at the moment. It's soon to tell if it's going to be the best deck or the best variant. Right now in the OCG, the best deck at the moment is Rescue Ace. But Tearlament has a solid second place. Maybe here in the TCG, things could be different. Maybe Tearlament ends up being the better deck. One thing that gives Rescue Ace a very significant advantage over Tier is that this deck is more resilient to Max C, while Tearlaments is not as resilient to Max C. And that's going to help a lot of, like, that's going to be a very big factor, because without Max C being in the game, there are not many cards that Rescue Ace can play over Tearlaments that give them a significant advantage. The only real one would be the fact that Rescue Ace does have a better way to play around Shifter than Tearlament does. However, the Sinful Spoils engine is going to be very heavy on both decks, so it's soon to tell if it was going to benefit them really that much. But yeah, pretty much what I want to take away from this is that Tearlaments have a problem. And that problem is not something that can be solved. That's not to say that this deck won't top. Like, I strongly think that this deck is going to be a top tier contender. I think moving forward in the next month or so, we're going to see a lot more from this deck. So it's better to just be prepared for it. Mirror Match are going to be crazy. Dweller is going to be a very, very important card, like in the main or side deck. Like, you're going to see this card a lot in many people's decks. And once Age of Overlord comes out, I think it's just going to bolster Tearlaments even more so. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it very enticing and understanding, or like to your benefit. And keep practicing and keep dueling.